they still have a family. And I just spit on myself. Okay, what? I'm losing it.
Dear Hollywood, child stars, broken family dynamics.
If you've made it this far, you're probably like, where are the parents? Who would let their child go through all of this? Today, I'm unpacking the complicated family and community dynamics that unfold when you're in the industry. Allegedly, a secure and supportive parent-child performer relationship is a key indicator on how well adjusted the child will be as an adult. But let's see what we actually find out. When you get into the industry, you may think it's you making an individual decision that only affects your time, energy, and pocketbook. It's impossible to perfectly foresee the many ways it'll actually have an impact on all the people around you, including family and friends. It's particularly hard for a child to foresee this, given they just recently learned how to spell their name and count to 20. So right off the bat, let's start with parents and guardians. And by the way, I realize that some kids may have guardians who are not their biological parents, and some families may have one or two or more parental figures. So I'm just going to alternate between terms. Feel free to substitute whichever variation makes most sense for your experience and comprehension. Unsurprisingly, so many questions and judgments come up towards parents. People often ask, what parent lets their child get into such a wild industry? And they blame and shame them automatically, claiming they'd never do anything like that in a million years with their kid. You may assume a parent is either using their child to live their own vicarious dream, maybe, or that the parent is unstable and has corrupt morals and values and isn't fit to protect the child. Could be true. Or that parents end up using the kid's money. Sometimes, yeah. Still, there's also a high percentage of parents who are actually really loving, supportive, protective, even well-educated and financially stable humans who merely want to help their child succeed at something they love. Based on my research, I believe that the majority of parents are like the general public and that they're trying to do what's best for their kids. They're not trying to take advantage of the child, and they're just awkwardly figuring everything out as they go. Regardless of the guardian's personality and whether or not the child themselves indicated they wanted to be in the biz, none of them are ever equipped with the necessary tools and handbooks to really know what they're getting into. I don't care how many seminars you attend or Reddit forums you read, the industry is chock full of twists and turns at every step, and they happen a mile a minute without any chance to process. Honestly, a parent would have to be a trained psychotherapist, lawyer, financial accountant, sociologist who's already done decades of deep personal work and development and who has no personal skin in the game in order to really have some foundational prep for Hollywood. Otherwise, good luck. We're going to cover a lot of territory today, including the responsibilities of parents, how family roles shift as the child gets into the industry, and the moments where many guardians accidentally or intentionally fall short. We'll talk about momagers and parents as managers, how the industry itself becomes this authority figure in the child's development, meaning all of the interactions and the messages that the child's absorbing during the time in the industry can actually have a deep and lasting impact on them as if the industry were an authority figure. We'll talk about the financial aspect of the child making money for their labor, and then we'll zoom out to see how the industry affects social development, as in, if they're working on set, what about school? What about holidays? What about seeing friends? Finally, we'll look at the arc of the parent-child relationship from when they begin to when they turn 18 and become an adult who no longer needs a guardian on set. It's very dicey. If I were to offer one thing to keep in mind about Hollywood and the parents and children who enter it, it's that whatever qualities a person possesses will likely become magnified by pursuing the industry. You're often pushed to your limits in different ways, so whatever beliefs or habits or tendencies you show up with, they're magnified. If you are insecure or overconfident, if you love attention or despise it, if you're great with managing money or horrible at it, if you panic in stressful situations or thrive, if you don't know how to manage anger or being out of control, get ready for all of this to be exacerbated. Then multiply this by the number of family members or close circle of friends going through their own amplification of personality traits, and imagine how this might be a recipe for conflict, turmoil, and in some cases, abuse. So first up, role reversals. Listen, plainly and simply, we all fall into certain roles in our family of origin. Some terms might be the hero, the clown, the black sheep, the rescuer, the lost child, mastermind, peacekeeper. In your family, who's in charge? What are the norms and expectations in terms of behavior, conduct, discipline? Do you have curfew, chores? What about grades? So just consider your family of origin. Were your guardians present or neglectful? Soft or harsh? Were there a lot of you or only a few in your immediate circle? What was the communication like? Was it open, closed? Did you feel hyper-independent, codependent, or interdependent? For the most part, we lock into certain roles and dynamics, and unless there's a major event or catalyst to examine and shift, we often reinforce these roles throughout our lives, even in subsequent relationships and settings. Interestingly, you might go as far as to make meaningful strides in your personal growth to, overcome or shift this original role. Yet, when you go back to visit family during the holidays, you find yourself reverting to the old dynamics, almost unconsciously. So, the industry is one of those catalysts for major shifts. When the industry is added into the mix, your child actor is suddenly taking up a disproportionate amount of time, energy, and resources. The training, the set hours, the special exceptions that have to be made with schools and other rec leagues that they're in, it ends up requiring an above average attention and commitment. So to give concrete examples of what a parent is expected to do and know, and where many simply aren't equipped to actually show up well, here's a list of 5 things pulled from Biz Parents Foundation. The aspiring Hollywood parent needs to: 1. Protect your child's image and privacy. Now, you might already be thinking about whether you would want your kid to have social media and to be mindful of what gets posted online or said in public. But the industry adds a whole new dimension. Your child's image will sometimes be owned by corporations and companies who can do a whole host of things. They can sell products with your kid's face on them. They can dictate your child's weight and appearance. Further, your child might have the spotlight on them and so attract adults who use their image for pedophilia and otherwise. Your child might be targeted by people who want to find where you live, and depending on what you post, they may be able to track down your location because of the information available. Your child's image also will affect their career trajectory and their reputation long term. Are they liked? Are they spoken highly of? Were they professional? It's kind of an icky thing to say, but you end up being responsible for curating and protecting their public persona, whether it's an accurate depiction or not. 2, you have to understand contracts and legal papers. You're going to have so much paperwork that makes so little sense, yet if you don't know what you're signing, it could mean jeopardy. Whether it's reading the fine print of how much your reps are going to commission off of every paycheck, or it's getting your child incorporated in order to better manage and protect their finances, or checking the exclusivity that a company demands when you work with them. For example, some people won't let you work for any other competitors for a period of time, and that may or may not jive well with your career path and commitments. So one rough contract, and your life could be hell. 3rd, finances. Listen, the industry is expensive to pursue, and if your child is making money, you have to know how to manage it well. There is this thing called the Coogan account, which is supposed to protect your kids' earnings. However, it only requires a meager 15% to be put away till they're 18. Many families decide to dip into the child's earnings as a way to sustain themselves, even if they didn't originally plan to. For example, a parent might eventually have to give up their job in order to be on set, but they still have a family to feed and shelter, so what are you going to do? Some families treat the earnings as a future college fund. Some families decide to set up an investment strategy. There's a lot of gray area and many ethical questions here. Even if your child agrees that you can be on their payroll or you can use money to support the family, do they really understand what's going on? Are they really old enough to make decisions with clarity and agency? Fourth, child labor laws.
This might sound absurd, but there are actually 17 states that don't even have child labor laws in place for entertainers. Yet, film, television, and other industries are employing minors to work. In California, 6-year-olds can be on set for 7 hours, 9-year-olds for 8 hours when school isn't in session, and during a school period, they must do 3 hours of school per day.
Put this all into context, because being on set isn't the only responsibility your child has. There's training, preparing for scenes, all kinds of stuff that tacks on hours every day in addition to the workload. Parents are expected to know these labor laws and also keep an eye on enforcing them if the set isn't adhering. This can be super intimidating, as parents don't want to be seen as stage parents for speaking up. But get this. Guess who's penalized if these laws are crossed during production? Not production. It goes on the parents. Yikes. And fifth, making sure your child has an education. This is so juicy and messy, because what is an education? Is it formal traditional schooling? Is it life experience? Does it have to have a regimen, or can there be wiggle room to define your own path? Well, as you wade into the industry, you might have to remove your child from traditional public or private schools and find alternative programs that allow for homeschooling or set schooling. Education becomes very spotty because sometimes on set, a child is already working so hard that a set teacher has to make the hard call of whether to push them in their studies or give them a much-needed break before the next scene. Additionally, minors are encouraged to finish school early and emancipate formally from their parents so they can work longer hours on sets. It's a strange, twisted thing when a company says, "I know you're 16, but can you work as a legal 18? Yes? Let's definitely choose you." And in the competitive environment, who doesn't want to improve their chances of winning? So, education, it's a mess. I'm not going to lie. Don't even get me started on having teachers who are enamored with fame and end up making excuses for your child's poor grades because they think it's so cool that they're in a movie, yet later on, when your child wants to apply for college, they didn't actually get the mandatory curriculum covered. Ask me how I know this. Now, you can find more on BizParent's site if you want to dig. Things like, spotting and avoiding scams, dealing with SAG-AFTRA, instilling a strong work ethic in your child so they behave professionally. But there you can also see an article, to be clear, I'm not directly endorsing this, that writes, think of it this way, your child is the product, their talent, their look, everything that makes them buyable. Your consumers are casting directors, and producers. While they're unfortunately giving you a clear depiction of the way things work, can we just pause to reflect on what we just said? Your child is a product. Their body, their mind are buyable. You want them to be sellable. Yeah, please just sit with that. Because even if you're not in the industry, you're likely a viewer and consumer of media, and therefore you're playing a role in this whole ecosystem. All this to say, the child actor ends up becoming quite a central figure in the family, the highly prized child. And I just want to take a moment to remind you that some families have other kids. So even though the guardians just took on all this additional responsibility, that doesn't mean you can neglect your other children or commitments. Oftentimes, this is where other siblings end up experiencing a sense of isolation and abandonment, a sense of inferiority and unworthiness. They may feel resentment or jealousy towards the actor sibling who's now making money or achieving notoriety. They may have peers who start to treat them differently just because of their affiliation. They may find it hard to carve out their own identity. Even for the guardians, if all eyes are on the one child, you might find yourself forgetting your own individual identity. And for the kid performer, as Evan Rachel Wood put it, they might sense this shift in the family and feel a lot of guilt for it. And whatever struggles that they were going through, they'll just begin to silence them so as to not take up any more space or come across as if they're complaining. I relate to this guilt a lot. I wondered what my sisters thought of me when I started becoming famous, when I started making money, when I didn't have to finish high school or ask myself what I wanted to do with my life because I already had a course charted. There was this weird occasion when my sister's high school basketball team, They like wanted or needed new warm-up uniforms, and for some reason, I was volunteered to buy the whole team their new warm-ups through my corporate bank account. Like we added the small logo somewhere on the sleeve. So it was a business expense for me, yet this roundabout way to appear supportive of my sister. At the time, I felt so guilty for having missed most of her games. So what? I just became some odd version of that absent parent who compensates by throwing gifts at the problem? Or rather, I was used as a puppet by an actual parent who was throwing gifts at the problem. Now, whenever I flew back to visit family, just once or twice during the holidays, it felt like my experience was hyper-centered. Relatives wanted to know what new jobs I was working on and if they could record anything on their TVs or any famous people that I had met. I don't remember them enthusiastically asking my sisters about the science fair or their summer job. So, role reversals and role shifts ensue. The child becomes more powerful than before. The child may become the hero, even if they were the black sheep. Parents might become stage parents and managers, or maybe even yes men because they want their kid to succeed so badly, they'll appease them in whatever way necessary to get them to perform. One other thing should be mentioned here, and that's that when the child actor takes over the family's schedule and focus, the parents' relationship, for example, if people were married or partnered, takes a significant hit. The stressors that come with cross-country commutes and with paying for expensive training, with covering responsibilities with the other kids, having no time together, having mixed perspectives on what to do about situations. It's very, very common for marriages to end in divorce. And or one or both of the parents lean into some of their own maladaptive coping strategies and harmful behavioral traits, and they become emotionally, verbally, or physically abusive. That was my case. Once we moved to California, it seemed like my career took off, but my family fell apart. My mom and stepfather were drinking more and more heavily, and they were fighting a lot. There was fear and stress all throughout the household. And as I said before, the industry has a way of magnifying things that live within. Well, it also has a way of leading people to just come undone. And the fact is, families often don't consider in advance what kind of check-in points they need to have in case things start to get out of whack. They're just enamored by the possibilities and the thrill, and they have no idea that they're speeding towards the edge of a cliff. There's just enough promise or hope or success or positive experiences that it seems worth staying, you know? It's kind of like an abusive relationship. So, what about the families that have full-on stage parents? Like, yeah, the ones you're thinking of right now, but even worse. Let's get into that. Whew. Join me for the next episode.
On the next episode,
there's a tendency for many parents to grow resentful when the child finally separates from them. The parent thinks the child is ungrateful for wanting to separate, or that the child owes them housing, affection, loyalty.